First, I want to mention that when I said in the previous recording that the pamphlet of Igeres Hateshuva was printed Tavshin Lamed, it was a slip of the tongue, the Platus Loshen, it was printed in the beginning of Tavshin Chof Tes. Tavshin Chof Tes Chofov, that's when the Rebbe first spoke about a certain part in the Igeres Hateshuva. And then, in the beginning of Tavshin Chof Tes, he asked that they should print this pamphlet, as I explained before. And you could imagine was for a koch there was by the Anashim, by the Bochrim, especially in the Igeres Hateshuva then. Since the Rebbe Tzach Shtar gekocht those years in the Igeres Hateshuva, so all the Bochrim were basically clear, Boki, remembered the whole of Igeres Hateshuva by heart. And not only Igeres Hateshuva, but also Hilchas Tshuva la Rambam, because a lot of the sichas of the Rebbe in Igeres Hateshuva were connected to different halachas in the Rambam Hilchas Tshuva. So they were Boki in Hilchas Tshuva. As I mentioned once, that in that year, Tavshin Chof Tes, we met at Rav Soloveitchik, and we spoke to him in Hilchas Tshuva of the Rambam, and that was by him a very special thing. He used to koch zachalat in Rambam, and especially in Hilchas Tshuva. So he was surprised that Bochrim know Hilchas Tshuva la Rambam. Even Bochrim know how to learn, but they know Hilchas Niske Momen, things like that, but not Hilchas Tshuva. And here he was surprised, but it was all because the Rebbe Tzach gekocht in Hilchas Tshuva. And as I said, these sichas were, the Mugadika ones of these sichas were printed in Biurim, this Kuntras called, the Kuntresim called the Biurim Igeres Hateshuva. Later on, the Rebbe was Magia many of the sichas, and they are scattered throughout Likutei Sichas. But mainly, in Tavshin Lamed Gimel, they were printed in the Sefer called Likutei Biurim, the Sefer Atanya Chelik Sheni, written by Rav Korf. We know Rav Korf wrote the first Chelik of Likutei Biurim Atanya, which were his Biurim, and in it a lot of the Biurim of the Rebbe. But this Sefer, Chelik Sheni, is only of the Rebbe. That's the way the Chelik Sheni was printed in the first Eitzah. Later on, they changed this whole Seder, but this is the way it was, only of the Rebbe. That this was a Sefer that was made up of three parts. All the Biurim of the Rebbe in Igeres Hateshuva, then Biurim of the Rebbe in Likutei Levi Yitzchok and Igeres Hateshuva, which were also built in Mugye. Later on, the Rebbe, for Likutei Sichas of Magia, all the Sichas of the Rebbe on Likutei Levi Yitzchok, on Igeres Hateshuva, the Rebbe was Mugye. But at that time, it wasn't Mugye yet, so built in Mugye, they printed in the Sefer. And also then there is a chelik of the Sefer, which is a sofer of more Biurim of the Rebbe for the whole Tanya, which did not go into the first chelik of Likutei Biurim. And it says in the Hagdome, the Pesach Dover, signed by Rabbi Korf, after he says what the Sefer is, it says this Loshen, Kol ze nase bipkudas kveit kedushas admor shlita. This is all done by the order of the Rebbe. And I think that the Rebbe was Magia this Pesach Dover, that this was by the order of the Rebbe. And because this all was of the Rebbe, so Rabbi Korf gave over some of the work to other people. So I remember the other people who worked on it was Rabbi Shua Munshain Olav Hasholem, and Yebodel B'chaim L'chaim. Rabbi Yosef Minkovich worked on it, and myself worked on it, in collecting all these different things to put it into the Sefer. And also, we used to ask from time to time the Rebbe certain shaylas, and the Rebbe would answer. And also, we would give into the Rebbe, when we found in different siches, like small biurim on a piece of Tanya, so Rabbi Shua Munshain would write it up and give it into the Rebbe, sign Rabbi Shia Korf's name, because he gave him permission to sign his name, asking the Rebbe to be Magia. And the Rebbe was Magia many pieces of biurim and Tanya. And that went into the last chelik of this Sefer, the new biurim of the Rebbe in Tanya that was not printed in the first chelik. Till finally, I remember the Rebbe answered, on the last one, he was Magia a piece that he sent in, and the Rebbe wrote that it's enough. How much are you going to give in? I don't remember if he wrote, I have no time or whatever, but the Rebbe was already saying, enough, don't give in anymore, and the Taka didn't give in anymore, and that became the third part of this Sefer, Biurim of the Rebbe, and the rest of and the whole of Tanya. So this is the Sefer, Biurim Likutei Biurim Sefer Tanya Chelik Beis. The majority of it is Biurim of the Rebbe on Igeres Hateshuva Davke. The whole Sefer is from the Rebbe, but most of it is on Igeres Hateshuva. And this was all around the time when the Rebbe tzag gekocht in Igeres Hateshuva, and everyone tzag gekocht in Igeres Hateshuva. It was shining mamish in Lubavitch. The union of Igeres Hateshuva was so much tefes mokim. And this pamphlet that the Rebbe said to give out was mefursim. They sent it out. They gave it out to different people. But the Rebbe, this is such a chosh of a thing to kochzach in Igeres Hateshuva.